Wa barakatuh. This is the IFTAR show, and inshallah today, leading up to the time of eating our dates and our samosas, inshallah, we'll be speaking about something which is very, very important, something which applies to youngsters, especially the youth, and certainly also those who have been here for many years, and the elders of our community. And that is the case of Muslim identity, the identity that we have as Muslims and as British Muslims as well. I remember some years ago, some 5-6 years ago, I was reading through the autobiography or the biography of Malcolm X. Now, for those of us who know or who might be aware, Malcolm X was a Muslim civil rights leader in America in the 1960s or the 1950s or so, when the black people of America were going through extreme and really a huge amount of injustice and oppression, and there was that civil rights movement that was being led in part by certain people such as Martin Luther King, and at the same time there was a movement from certain Muslim leaders such as Malcolm X as well. Now, Malcolm X's story is a very interesting story, and I think that book that I read up till now as well is one of the most sort of transformative books I have ever personally read in my life, and I would recommend anyone to read that book as well. And the reason that I found it particularly transformative was because in Malcolm X's life, and really it deserves a bit of going into his life itself, we find that in the beginning of his life, where he grew up in the 1930s and 40s, he grew up in a society, in a place, in a time where being black, being young and black was looked down upon. And a lot of the people at his time and a lot of the people around him, a lot of his fellow black people, they saw other people, or they saw the white people in their area, or they saw the white people in America, in the United States. And here in the UK, it wasn't as bad as maybe it was in America, because of the connotations of slavery that had been there for 100 years before that. For black people in America, it was particularly bad. And what he says in his own autobiography, that he grew up in part not being proud of his heritage and his identity, but wanting to be white. And he mentions many, many stories of that. He mentions how for 20-25 years he found that to be the case. And it was only after he became Muslim, or first when he joined the Nation of Islam, and eventually after that he became a Muslim, and they moved for the civil rights movement, that he came to embrace his identity. Now, his story is an amazing story. One of the sort of outlandish stories that happens in his tale. He mentions this himself, and this is something that he reflects upon, and he looks back at himself with such tragic, with such a disgrace that he looks back at himself, where he mentions that at one time or one point, what they used to do, that a lot of black people, they have hair which is quite curly. Now, those of us who have curly hair will appreciate this, that it is quite difficult to look after. And he mentions that one of the things that they would do, and this was again because what they would see in Hollywood, what they would see in films, what they would see on posters, again, representation was mostly white, and so they would see straight hair. And so the black people of America, they would want straight hair as well. So what they would do, one way you could do it was you could go to a barber or a hairdresser and spend a lot of money to try to straighten your hair. But another way that you could do it was, and he mentions this himself, is you get some off-the-shelf chemicals and you put it onto your hair, and you let it stay there for half an hour or an hour or so, and then you have to wash it off. But those chemicals are such, and it was quite a dangerous procedure, because if those chemicals stayed on your head and you did not wash it off, you run the risk of burning your head. You literally run the risk of burning your scalp. So those chemicals, you put it on, and everyone used to do this at the time. This was a cheaper alternative to going to the hairdresser. And he goes, at one point I was in my apartment and I was doing this, and again the primary motivation of doing this was because we just wanted to fit in. We did not have our identity. We were not proud of who we are and who we were. So we wanted to fit in, and so we were doing this thing where we were putting chemicals onto our head. And he goes, it came to a point where that half an hour or 1 hour had run out, my timer had run out, I needed to wash my hair. But what had also happened at that exact moment was the water had switched off. Now, he goes, the water had turned off. We go there, we try to switch on the taps, the water's not coming out, and now you're panicking because those chemicals are now burning into your head. And he goes, I had to go to the point, and he mentions this, and he says this with such regret, that I had to go to the point where I had to find the only water in my apartment, and that was in the toilet. And he goes, I had to put my head into the toilet to try to wash those chemicals off. And he says this later on in his life, and he talks about how, as a young black person growing up, how they lacked an identity, and because of trying to fit in, because they wanted to fit in and be like other people, they had to go through such limits and such degrees of disgrace, such degrees of humiliation just to try to fit in. And this story, obviously his story is even more pertinent to us because eventually he would become a Muslim. And he would become a very proud Muslim, a person who was proud of his identity, and eventually he would be killed because of his Islam. There are obviously conflicting theories about whether he was killed because of his civil rights activism or whether he was killed because of his Islam. But the majority is the scholarly opinion is more favored towards he was killed because of his Islam. And this is in his life and in his tale we find someone who just in the past 50-60 years, we find someone who shares in many regards something that we also experience, something we have also experienced as Muslims in the UK. And that is that we have a very unique identity to ourselves, which is different to the identity that we would have had we been back home, wherever back home might have been. Whether you came from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, parts of Arabia, whether you came from North Africa, that identity is there. And had we been living there, we would have had a very secure identity. But having lived or having moved and migrated to and transported ourselves to a different country, now we face within ourselves a challenge, and that challenge is very similar to the challenge that Malcolm X faced. Now, obviously, a young black man's experiences growing up in the 1930s and 40s in America would be very different to the experiences of a young Muslim living in the UK or in the Western world. But still, there are still certain things that are applicable on both sides. There are certain things that we can apply, analogies that we can apply on both sides, and that is especially true today for ourselves. Now, there is a point to be made that as Muslims, we have to be very proud of our identity, and that goes without saying. And alongside that, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba have mentioned this point that a Muslim has a specific identity, and Muslims have a specific identity. That is not to say that culture does not exist within Islam, and in fact within Sharia itself we have elements of culture within it. That a faqih or a mufti, a person who's an alim, he should be aware of the happenings around him. He should be aware of urf. Urf is something which exists within Sharia, and in fact within law in Sharia we have something which is called urf, which is that what is common amongst people, what do people usually do. And so there is an element of culture that exists, and culture also enriches a person's life, and that is certainly there. But there is underneath or over culture, every single Muslim, regardless of which culture they come from, ascribes to an identity. And that identity is particularly different to the identity of any other religion or any other people. And that is why we have a hadith, for example, مَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. That person who imitates a people, he is amongst them. And that hadith is a very strong hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where we have been told very specifically that we have an identity, and that identity is with other Muslims, and that we have to maintain that identity. That is not to say that we do not work with other people. That is not to say that we are separate from other religions or other religious groups or affiliations, and that's it. We demarcate our lines and we have no association with them. No. But as Muslims, we have a very specific identity. And I wanted to speak about that today, specifically because, like I mentioned, us Muslims living in the UK, maybe 10-15 years ago it would have been a bit more difficult, but today, alhamdulillah, it's become a bit easy. But still, we have this issue for many, and especially for our youngsters, we have this issue. And that is exactly why I said at the beginning, this topic is specifically aimed at youngsters, but it also is aimed at those older, because that identity is something which is in a part of every single person, whether you are young or old. And also, for the elders, it is their responsibility to create that for the youngsters so that they can also proudly grow into their Islam. And to start off, or to really to begin this topic, or the hadith that sort of enshrines this topic, really is the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, "Bada al-Islamu ghariban wa sayaudu kama bada ghariban fatuba lil-ghuraba." That Islam began as something strange and it will return to something strange. So glad tidings be to the strangers. And whenever I speak about identity to any students, I always begin with this hadith. And this hadith is very close to this topic, because it speaks, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking to the Sahaba. And the Sahaba, when Islam first came to them, they might have been amongst their own people, and they might have been amongst the Quraysh, and they might have been amongst people of their own ethnicity. but their identity had been very distinctly changed. Every single person who was a non-Muslim in Mecca knew the Muslims and knew them as someone different. And even when those Muslims traveled to Medina and they lived in Medina, we saw that those who, they might have been family members, they might have been, father and son, they might have been brother and sister, they might have been very close before Islam, but suddenly after Islam, their identity had changed, and even the Quraysh regarded them as someone different. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying in this hadith that Islam is such, and Islam is going to create that slight distinction for the people who are, for the people of Iman. And this hadith is also, in a sense, it is glad tidings for every single person that finds it a bit difficult, whether that be a sister for her to wear hijab, whether that be for a brother to perform salah in front of other people, to perform salah in your school, to perform salah in college. All of those matters, all of those things, all of those places, it might be difficult, but this hadith is telling us, and this hadith is informing us that it is going to be difficult. Yes, certainly. Like how Rasulullah said, Bada al-Islamu ghariban, Islam began, and it will return to being something strange. But tuba lil ghuraba, the fact that you find it difficult, the fact that you feel a little bit alienated or ostracized, or you find it a bit difficult, that is the point. That is a show of your iman. That is a display and an exhibition of your Islam and your iman, and you are showing that openly. And that is glad tidings for you, meaning you're doing something right. And for every single young person that finds it difficult, this hadith really sticks out for them. And talking about the matter of youth as well, and this is addressed mainly and directly to our youth as well, that one of the times in a person's life, and this is also backed up by many psychologists as well. Psychology has given us a lot of literature and information about the different stages of a person's life, and we find that in this age between 13 and 19, the teenage years, or really between 14, 15 and 19, is the time when a person is most away from their family, most away from their kin and their kin and their family, and most closest to their friends and associations outside. And usually after 2021, a person sort of moves back towards their family, or as they get married, or if they are in a relationship, or also alongside that, just generally speaking, a person moves more back towards their family and orientates themselves more around their family after the age of 2021. And before 13 and 14, usually, the child is a child, and they will rely on their parents, and they will see their parents as, the most amazing people in the world, and everything that the parent says and does, they will try to follow and imitate. But between those ages of 14 and 19, a person goes through certain stages, and those stages are what are particularly important and relating to identity. Now, between this age of 14 and 19, and this is something again that I say to all of my students, that in this time, if you mess up, you go along the wrong route, you really mess yourself up, it is very difficult after that age, or you can really mess yourself up for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But if you're okay, from ages of 14 to 19, 20, if you're okay, it is very unlikely, not impossible, but it is very unlikely for a person that after that age they get messed up, that after that age they go down the wrong route, they take the wrong friends. Because the friends that you make between that age are usually going to be the friends that you now have from 20 to 25, 30, 40, 50 onwards. Those are the friends that you now have made for the rest of your life. The outlook that you have at that age is the outlook that you're going to have pretty much for the rest of your life. And the qualifications and the career path that you choose at that age, 15, 16, going through your GCSEs, A-levels and university, the first few years of university, the career path that you choose, and if you're really invested into it and you're going really deep into it, then that's the outlook that's going to be for the rest of your life. That's going to be your career path, and that is the job that you will get, that is the people you will associate with, that is the path that you will go down. But on the flip side, like I mentioned, if you mess up in that time, if you go down the wrong route, if you make the wrong friends, then that's going to be the case for the next 5-10 years. It's going to really mess you up, and then obviously to salvage your life after that becomes very difficult. And that is particularly also where the matter of identity falls into place. This is the time where a person is questioning themselves. Do I associate myself to whatever culture that I belong to? Am I Gujarati? Am I Bengali? Am I Arab? Am I this? Am I that? Am I, even when it comes to the matter of Islam, we might not be questioning Islam itself, but a lot of questions will arise at this time. And that is also normal, that is perfectly normal, and those questions should be answered, and those questions should be posed to those people who can answer those questions as well. Those questions of identity are going to pop up at this time, and those questions of identity are there to be solved. Those questions of identity are there to be solved. But it is also important for a person, and for those of us who are listening, within that age bracket, within that age group, it is your responsibility as a person to be proud of who you are. I mean, again, like I said, I would strongly recommend any person to read through the autobiography of Malcolm X. The wisdoms of those who have passed before us are very, very important, and the wisdoms of those who are older than you are also very important. But look into those lives and look into those wisdoms and really read into them, and you will find exactly the same thing that you are going through, exactly the same thing that you are speaking about, that you are wondering about, those thoughts that you've got inside your heart that you don't feel comfortable asking anyone else. Those thoughts were the same ones that every single person before you had. And as I mentioned about Malcolm X, it is that time that you really need to forge your identity as a Muslim, as a young British Muslim. It is really that time. And if you make it strong at that time, inshallah, for the rest of your life, you're going to be really sorted out. And why can't we have a proud Muslim identity? And this is another question that is really important. How do we create this identity? Why can we not be proud of it? And this question then also ties into the elders as well, those of us who are older and listening. How do we also foster that identity within our youth? Now, I think there's two elements to this. One is very important, which is education. And education is a passport to the future. Education is something which is very important, and we need to educate. On one hand, we need to educate our youth on what it means to be Muslim, why they should be proud to be a Muslim. And at the same time, it is a youth's responsibility, it is your responsibility, whoever is listening, that you also educate yourself on why I am a Muslim, why should I be proud to be a Muslim, why am I, and also, I mean, that also extends by the way to your culture. If you are Gujarati, if you are Arab, if you are Bengali, if you are Syrian, if you are Moroccan, why should I be proud of my culture? What is there of my culture that I should be really proud of? Not proud of in the sense that I look down on others, but certainly proud of, what are the defining characteristics of what it means to be Moroccan? What are the defining characteristics of what it means to be Saudi Arabian? Whatever it may be. And that is something that every single person should look into. And we should feel proud of our culture. We should feel proud of our identity. And when you do that, a person becomes whole. And one of the problems about having two separate identities, one is being British and the other being Muslim, is that it really stunts a person's development. A person's development is stunted. They are in two minds. They feel that they have to have one identity when they're going outside, one identity when they are at home. And when a person has that, they are living a lie to themselves. They are living a life in which they are effectively lying to themselves, where you've got two faces. One face that you show to one group of people, another face that you show to another group of people. And if that is the case, then that has to be merged together. That has to be brought together. And it is not impossible for us to do that. It is not impossible for us to merge those two identities together. And especially in a time where everyone in today's time, everyone is proud of anything and everything that they do. We have, mashallah, people are proud about everything. So if you're living in a time where people are proud about everything and anything, why can we not be proud of our Islam? Why can we not be proud of our identity as Muslims? So the first thing that we have to do is educate ourselves. Educate ourselves on what it means to be a Muslim. Educate ourselves on what it means to be whatever culture we are from. And when we do that, we will learn and we will understand the rich legacy, the tapestry that extends beyond us and before us. And also it will reduce that sense of inferiority. That we look at other people and we look at other cultures and we look at maybe the culture around us and we think, oh, that's so amazing, that's so brilliant, I want to be like that. But rather, when we look at our own history and we see what our history has given us, and we see that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, then we look less towards other people and we look more to ourselves. And that education is massively important. And secondly, I think importantly is to create or foster a sense of pride within ourselves as Muslims, that Islam has given us something which is incredible. The Quran that we have is amazing. The Sharia that we have itself is amazing. And I mean, in a sense, this also comes back to education. As Muslims, we have to make sure that we understand what our deen is telling us. We understand what our religion is like. And I'm not talking about learning the 4 faraid of wudu and the 3 faraid of ghusl and learning how to perform salah. I'm talking about just generally the concepts within Islam, generally understanding Islamic theology, watching a few videos of reputable scholars that can tell you about this, or maybe reading some books about this, reading some history about Islam. And what that will do again is that we understand that our own history has such incredible personalities before. And maybe one of those personalities might pop out, and maybe we might feel inspired by any one of those personalities and feel like, okay, this is the path that I want to go down into. And every single person can make their own identity from that. And it does not matter again whether it does not matter what your level of comprehension or what your level of knowledge within Islam is. A person might be perfectly practicing, a person might not be practicing so well, but identity is not something that comes or that is associated necessarily with practice. Identity is something that is associated with the person and the personality. And ultimately, that is what Islam has given us. That is what Iman gives us. And then that identity expressed is what practice is. That identity expressed is what amal becomes, what our a'mal is. That is when we are sure of our identity, when we are sure of who we are as Muslims and our place in the world, then practicing Islam becomes a lot easier. To be able to go to an airport, you need to perform your salah. I remember when we traveled to Australia for Taraweeh, we were stopped over in Thailand, and as we were stopped over, the time of Maghrib was approaching, and we were in that place just before the waiting lounge, just before you enter the plane. There's nowhere, we can't leave to go to the prayer room, we can't go anywhere, and we had to perform our salah. The entire plane worth of passengers, a full 747's worth of passengers are sitting there. There's nowhere to hide, and you feel embarrassed, and you feel somewhat shy. And this was when I was like sort of 18, 19 years old, two youngsters going to Australia. This is a place where, again, Australia, majority white. Many of these people never seen a Muslim pray, perform salah. And so to take out the musalla from our luggage, to open up our luggage, take out musalla, put it down, find the qibla and start performing salah, it's difficult. But then again, at the same time, those actions can only be expressed when the identity inside has been formed. So those actions that we expressed of salah, that only came about once the identity inside, once we were proud as Muslims, and once we could express our identity. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us such Muslims that become part and parcel of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and become worthy of the glad tidings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he says, "Tuba lil ghuraba," glad tidings be to the strangers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us and allow us to forge our identity as Muslims. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله وبيدك الخير كله علانيته وسره فأهل أنت أن تحمد وأهل أنت أن تعبد وأنت على كل شيء قدير. اللهم لك الحمد كالذي نقول وخير مما نقول ولك الحمد كالذي تقول لك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا. اللهم صل على محمد بعدد من صلى وصام وصل على محمد بعدد من قاعد وقام. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم انصر إخواننا المسلمين المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم انصر إخواننا المسلمين في غزة. اللهم انصر إخواننا المسلمين في غزة. اللهم انصرهم ولا تنصر عليهم. اللهم انصر من نصرهم واخذل من خذلهم. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم تقبل منا صلاتنا وصيامنا وقيامنا وركوعنا وسجودنا. O Allah, aid and assist our brothers and sisters in Gaza. O Allah, aid and assist our brothers and sisters in Gaza. O Allah, they are going through such difficult times. O Allah, many of them are starving. O Allah, while
كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أفطر قال ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم would say when he would break his fast, the thirst has gone and the veins have become moist and the reward has become established insha'Allah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته.
O Allah, Lord of this perfect call and everlasting prayer, grant Muhammad, peace be upon him, the wasila and the greatness, and raise him to that praised position which you have promised him.
The IFTAR show is brought to you by Mercy to Humanity. Feed a family this Ramadan for only £30 for the month. That's right, that's only £1 per day. Donate now. www.mercytohumanity.org.uk